Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushal Mehra. My guest today is Gautam Chikermane. Gautam is a vice president at ORF. His area of research is international and Indian economic policy. He's a Jefferson Fellow at the East West Center, Honolulu. Gautam is an author of 5 books: India 2030, 70 Policies That Shaped India, Tunnel of Varanavat, The Disruptor, Arvind Kejriwal and the Audacious Rise of the Aam Aadmi Party, 5 Decades of Decay. Gautam's expertise lies in foreign policy, economics, and politics, and he's also currently the Associate Senior Research Fellow, India Desk ISBI. So, Gautam, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Namaste. Dhanyavad. Thank you for calling me. Delighted to be here.
First of all, I'm delighted that Gautam is here. For the record, Gautam ko lana bahut mushkil tha. So this is a minor achievement for the Cārvāka podcast, because the Cārvāka podcast has finally achieved to get Gautam on the podcast. So today's discussion is going to be the recent declaration where India just I don't know how to put it. India declared some open tenders, and the people who were allowed and some people were excluded in the 5G technology infrastructure build-up claims. And interestingly, China was excluded from that. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of a background, Gautam, I've been reading Gautam's work on 5G and why India should exclude China from our 5G network for a while. So this is not just now. I've been reading Gautam's views on this for maybe, I think, a good year and a half, where, in fact, Gautam and I have had many offline conversations about it. So Gautam, let us start from here. So can you give us a brief explanation of what exactly has happened, as in what has been what does the exclusion of Huawei from the 5G trials mean, and why has it been done?
Yeah, so for a long time, 5G has been around, and India is a huge market. And several companies have been wanting to get into this sector. India itself perhaps needs to expand its footprint from 4G to 5G. Now, for a long time, the debate was whether India is ready for 5G. Should we call in 5G because 4G has happened only recently? Mm-hmm. Second, what are the advantages of 5G? Around this time, and maybe towards 2017 onwards, 2018, the misbehavior of China began. So today there are very few equipment. So 5G runs, let me just hold that back. 5G runs on equipment, and that's a very sophisticated, very complex equipment. And there are very few equipment manufacturers of 5G.
Okay.
The leader is Huawei. It has the maximum patents. It is there in the most number of countries. It is technologically superior. Or let us say it is at the cutting edge. Maybe others are as good or as bad, but Huawei is not something that is a laggard. And it is the cheapest. That cheap factor is a separate issue, in the sense it is about 30% cheaper, but over a period of 10 years, when you amortize the expense, when companies amortize the expense, it doesn't work out too much. So that cheapness is only at the point of entry.
Got it.
The other manufacturers are Nokia, Samsung, and so on. So the discussion was that, on the one hand, if China as a nation, as a country, actually not even as a nation, China as a party, Chinese Communist Party, which has actually captured the country, is behaving in a manner that is against India in every forum, everywhere. Can we allow trade to go on business as usual? Mm-hmm. When Galwan happened, you noticed how even traders began to stop getting Chinese goods. Consumers began to stop using Chinese goods. Of course, that has now changed again. But there was an feeling of anti-China. Now, 5G is not a teddy bear. Or let me put it, it's not a stuffed panda.
All right.
5G is a complex equipment. And 5G is what is known as telecom, which is a critical infrastructure. What is critical infrastructure?
Yeah.
Critical infrastructure is one where if it gets destroyed, it affects the country. It could affect the country's security. It could affect the country's economy. It could affect the country's safety, the citizens' safety, and so on. So telecommunications is a critical infrastructure, just like roads, ports, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So should India, given Chinese misbehavior, consistently misbehaving, allow a nation that we cannot call an enemy because we don't like the word, but a nation that is behaving no less than an enemy into our borders and allow it to access information, access our data, influence the conversations, and at a pinch, just hold back and distort the expressions that 5G can give. For instance, smart cars or self-driven cars, smart homes, agriculture, and so on. So this becomes a very sensitive, critical, and suppose tomorrow there is a problem on the border, as there is today, can China then squeeze India and get benefits? So that is the question. I have been writing against the entry of Chinese companies in India's 5G for some time. I'm glad that in the tests that were announced on 4th May, tests for 5G, the government has excluded Chinese companies. It has not banned China like, let us say, Australia has done or United States has done. It has just excluded them from being equipment providers to India's telecoms.
So Gautam, I want to dig a little bit deeper on what you spoke about. So let us classify that as the nature of the technology. Let's say the nature of 5G per se. So you said this is critical infrastructure and how the Chinese threat could perceive. So you gave very interesting examples, let's say, of self-driving cars or stuff like that. So what we are basically talking about is the nature of the technology, if I'm able to get this correctly, itself is that if you have a Chinese interference in our infrastructure, so tomorrow, if India and China have some sort of a conflict where China is on the other side and we are on the other side, it could actually bring down our functioning of our society or our life as in general in a catastrophic way. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So 5G allows an always-on government and always-on corporation. It allows for completely networked societies. So if that part is taken out, you can imagine the kind of havoc that it can create. Yes, that is exactly what I mean.
Yes, so Gautam, if I was to play the devil's advocate here, although my personal views are very much in sync with yours, but it's still, when we are doing a discussion, we have to try to bring the other side of the argument as much as we can. So if I was to give, let's say, somebody from the Chinese side of the things will be like, oh, we are not a threat, we come in peace, in quotes. We are not going to do that. Or the other argument will be a pure market economics argument that today China has the best 5G technology in terms of the quality of the tech and in the pricing of the tech. So if India was to exclude these vendors like Huawei from our trial runs and basically not even allow them at the bottommost level of, so not even at any stage is any technology from 5G going to be allowed. So what impact would that have on the overall quality of our 5G network in terms of just the deliveries and also the costs of the network? So the classical free market argument would be that we should go with the best technology and the cheapest technology. So what would be the possible answers in that kind of a scenario?
Under normal circumstances, I would support every word that you have said. I would support it. I agree with it. In fact, in my previous writings for several years, I have forcefully echoed this idea. I believe in free markets, free and regulated markets. Free doesn't mean free laissez-faire, but free but regulated. So within the confines of law, within the confines of a regulatory structure, markets can function and so on. So I'm a firm believer in that, and that's good. And so your point is in that direction. But my fear, or let me differentiate, is that you are looking at 5G like a stuffed panda. And that's not the case. 5G is critical infrastructure. Now, the question that you, and the reason why China should not be there, I explained to you earlier. But the question that you did not ask, and which is the core question that the Chinese would ask, is, are you comfortable with Sweden looking at your data? Are you comfortable with Finland examining your data? South Korea looking at your data? America? Are you comfortable with that? The answer is yes. And the reason for that answer is that tomorrow, if there is, firstly, we don't have a problem with any of these countries.
Sure.
And it is unlikely that we will. In fact, if they all want to trade with India, they all want to invest in India, they want to buy from India, they want to use services of India. So there is a generally the economy and overpowering, plus there are liberal values that bind us together as democracies. The difference is, let us say Sweden begins to misbehave with that data. The unity of values through democracy protects us. And the one thing that protects us or any other country, and vice versa, is an independent judiciary. Suppose there is a problem, there are several avenues in order that can fix them. You have civil society, you have a free press, you have an independent judiciary. Above all, you have values that work together, market values that function within markets. Unlike China, for which everything is a geopolitical superiority, pomposity, everything is strategic, hegemonic. They don't want to engage in markets. They want to control markets. They want to convert everything into a communist network, an authoritarian state. They are in fact using the weaknesses of democracies, which are not really weaknesses, but they're the chinks in India's democracy, in the global democracies, not just India, by the way, in global democracies, to puncture holes and push their agenda, their authoritarian agenda over there. Their own markets are closed, by the way. And they keep arguing that your market should open. So it is not a country that functions within the confines of what is known as the rule of law. It functions on the rule of whims. The whim of one man, Xi Jinping, who has accelerated this anti-India stance over the last few years. Irreversibly, in my opinion, although given that these days China is getting more and more isolated, my sense is logic says, but this is a democratic logic. He's not answerable to anybody. So a democracy would be answerable and he would withdraw. But since it's an authoritarian state, I don't think he's going to withdraw. So logic says that if one country after another, Australia has said no, United States has said no, India has said no, in Europe, Sweden has said no, Italy has said no, Germany is on the edge, so is France. But one country after another is saying, no, we do not want Huawei, we don't want China. So there is a pressure on China. This pressure in a democracy would function that you would take corrective action. The democracy would evict that leader. An authoritarian state cannot. And hence, a company offering critical infrastructure to India from a country that is openly hostile to it is a no. So even if you say that the Huawei products are 10 times better than the next best, my personal choice would be that we go for the next best. We don't need a highly efficient but a stealth snooping agency. We need a more steady, more secure infrastructure that China cannot offer.
So another thing, now I'm going to bring in another argument that has been given by the Chinese side, Gautam, and it's very interesting. So there are a few Chinese handles that I follow on Twitter. These are Chinese handles that are not from mainland China, but sometimes they seem like, I'm not going to tell the handles, but they seem like these are handles that have some kind of a relationship with the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, something. So they will always give these arguments. So these are the standard arguments they give. Is like, like you said with Sweden, oh, so you don't like, you don't mind the Swedish people snooping on you. Oh, but we are never the kind of people, who would want to, do anything ill to you. So I'll tell you. So a lot of these people nowadays are, look how they are attacking your prime minister and your government. Look how they do this. I think you Indians are overreacting. We really don't intend to do anything else. We are actually the real capitalists. We just want to trade with you. We have no interest in anything else. So what do you do to those kinds of allegations where the in fact the counter allegation is in India, it is which is the state that is overreacting. In fact, I remember in the case of Australia too, when Australia took a hard stance when it came to 5G, they to banned them. They started retaliating with the Aussies. I remember they kind of banned a lot of imports of Aussie products into China and stuff like that. So what would you think that, if the Chinese think India is overreacting, so what do you think China is going to do to India as a retaliation of, not allowing Huawei in the trials?
Whatever China can do has done already at Galwan. So the only thing that is missing so far is if they push forward, there will be war. That's it. So beyond that, there is nothing more China can push. China is out. It has made its intentions clear. Earlier, there were soft aggressions. For instance, supporting terrorists from Pakistan, putting India down in the Security Council, ensuring that India is humiliated at every forum. So they have done all that. India has walked around with it. That's okay. This is part of global negotiations. You give some, you take some, and move on. But by Galwan, they have made their intentions clear that they are not looking to be friends with India at all. Why should? They don't. We are 5 times bigger than India. We are technologically superior. Our defense is stronger. Our economy is stronger. What can India do? It's time to show India its place. We are a regional hegemon, attempting to be a global hegemon, and India is getting in our way. We will fix it. Are you going to invite that enemy into your house? The other thing that you mentioned was what other countries are doing, and China is not interested. I just want to read four articles from their national intelligence law. I wrote this in my paper, which I wrote 2 years ago.
Sure.
I'm just going to read out 4 articles from their law. It's called the National Intelligence Law 2017. Articles, there are 4 articles, Article 7, 9, 12 and 14. Article 7. All organizations and citizens shall support, assist and cooperate with national intelligence efforts in accordance with law and shall provide and shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of.
Nice.
Article 9. The state gives commendations and awards to individuals and organizations that make major contributions to national intelligence efforts.
Interesting.
Article 12. In accordance with relevant state provisions, national intelligence work institutions may establish cooperative relationships with relevant individuals and organizations and retain them to carry out related work. Article 14. National intelligence work institutions carrying out intelligence efforts may request that relevant organs, organizations, and citizens provide necessary support, assistance, and cooperation. In English, it means that every organization, every entity, every individual is beholden by Chinese law to be a spy. That is what it means. Are you going to engage with such a country? Should we engage with such a country? And I'm saying, stuffed panda is okay. Although I'm not sure what chips they will stuff into that stuffed panda also, we don't know. But stuffed panda is okay. Are you going to give them critical infrastructure? Are you going to give them access to your ports? Are you going to give them access to your airports? Are you going to give them access to your banking? My answer is no. It's a no-brainer. And I'm glad that this government has taken that step to keep them out of India's 5G without using the word ban. They have just excluded. They have mentioned that these are the 4 companies that will do it. And Huawei and ZTE, which is the other known as the poor cousin of Huawei, will not be part of India's 5G trials.
Oh, so this question is not necessarily to do with China per se, but I actually had just one query, Gautam. So what do you think is the importance of a 5G network for a country like India? Uh, Let us forget China for now. Just from an economic and a technological point of view. So what kind of benefits are we looking at just from a 5G perspective?
Um, there are many advantages that 5G gives in terms of speed of whatever else that you are doing. But 5G also enables other new areas. For instance, when I mentioned a self-driven car or an autonomous car, what are we looking at? We are looking at a car, a product which is now because of 5G linked to a cloud up in the air,
Mm-hmm.
and the cloud is telling the car that this is the road, you turn left, you turn right, it will turn on its own. They will see that there is a cycle on the way, there is an auto rickshaw coming from the other side, you wait, there's a pedestrian crossing, there's a red light, and so on, and allow it to move. So this is one complexity. So there is, can you imagine the data inside in just this transaction?
Yeah.
Now there are 1 million cars running. Each of those cars is linked to that same cloud. It's talking to that same cloud and with each other. Can you see the complexity there? So these are the things. Somebody in a village needs surgery. Let's say a simple surgery, cataract, and the doctor is in Delhi. Using 5G, he can do that surgery sitting in Delhi and bring healthcare access to rural areas or areas where access is not there. So of course you will need a hospital, you will need the premises, etc. But the doctor, the critical link out there of who will conduct that cataract surgery or any other surgery is sitting in Delhi or in Mumbai. There's a problem in India that most the doctors don't go to rural areas. Well, here's your solution. Having said that, I also believe, and this is more of, I believe that perhaps India is not ready for 5G. I think our road infrastructure needs a lot of improvement. You go outside Delhi, go cross 100 kilometers, and I'm not talking about national highways, which are world class. I'm talking about the inside roads. And I think there's a lot to just to talk about roads, for instance. And there's a lot that needs to be done on that front before we are ready to do 5G. Which are the countries that have gone 5G? China, Australia, South Korea, US. What are their GDPs? What is the level of development? You know, where do they stand? So I think there is I haven't analyzed this in great depth, but I'm quite certain that the sophistication of offering the kinds of services, products, etc., that a 5G gives, perhaps we need a little time, maybe a decade. And by which time, I think this 5G race would be behind us. In 2028, Samsung is saying that we will run commercial 6G. There could be a 7G. There could be a disruption in the Gs itself. You could go in some other direction. India moved from a shortage of landlines to a surplus of cellular phones in hardly any time. It hardly took a second. So even if we miss this 5G, I think we won't lose very much. In fact, sometimes I feel I don't know whether we are even using our 4G well. But just to stick to the 5G argument, I think it is transformative technology. It will create new businesses, particularly in services. And I'm not even talking about, excuse me, things like downloading a movie in 10 seconds and so on. I'm not even talking about those things. I'm talking about education, healthcare, I'm talking about governance, I'm talking about property records, I'm talking about agriculture, terrain, meteorological systems, and so on. So 5G does give you all those benefits, and perhaps in the initial areas, initial launches, perhaps that is where it will be used. Of course, other than those 10-second movie downloads.
Yeah. So Gautam, now let's go into the the crux of the issue. So what is the way forward? So as far as I see, all right, we have stopped China as of now without using the word ban. So, we basically disallowed them from within our network. So they're going to react. They're going to try and do something. They're going to maybe create disruptions of different kinds. Maybe those disruptions might be social. Maybe those disruptions might be harming our foreign policy interests in other parts of the world. They're going to react. So what do you think, in your view, is going to be the way forward from where we are here?
What is China doing that is already not antagonistic to India? So I don't know. You see, that's what I'm saying. That they can do this, they can do that, but the worst that they can do, they have already done. Galwan. And the next step is war. So now we are already at the edge. They have already pushed India to the edge, and all those illusions of China being a nation whose rise will be peaceful, which will look at the world in a different way than America has, for instance, are now we know that they were a mirage, that they were a cover, and China was just biding its time. And with with Australia, you mentioned those trade restrictions. What they did was they banned their. I'll give you one example. Australia banned Huawei, and in fact, not only Huawei, it has banned China from all its critical infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And China banned their wines. China was the biggest importer of their wines. Well, California is drinking those wines. New Zealand is drinking those wines. Now other countries are drinking those wines. So I think there is a coming together. There is an understanding that China is a rogue nation, and a single country may or may not be able to work with it. So you need to work collectively. So recently there was a US and Japan technological collaboration last week. I've written about it, and I think that's the way forward. That they need to add a Quad into it. They need to add Australia and India into that agreement, and not only that, they have to add South Korea, because in 5G the cutting edge Samsung is on the cutting edge. So I think new developments will happen. Quad is one, Indian Ocean region another. So many of these things are happening. If China has already shown its colors, the question then becomes, it may stop trade. Okay, we have 8% of the trade with China. Let us say trade goes to zero, and we won't get cheap Diwali crackers. We'll get slightly expensive. I think Indians can buy them at a consumer level. At a critical infrastructure level, there was that Bombay where the power had gone off. Remember, mm-hmm. and recently, last month, I believe. And again, fingers were being pointed, although nothing has been proven. But I don't I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't disagree with it, that China did it to teach India a lesson. These are the kind of lessons that India will need to learn if it allows China into its critical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. In fact, when you step back, the government, in my opinion, is doing very well. It's not a whimsical solution. There is a systematic policy. I call it the no China policy. The government will not call it that because Absolutely. We are a democracy. You cannot single out a country. But the exclusion of Huawei from India is Series 3. Series 1 was when in June 2020, India banned 59 Chinese apps.
Yes.
In the next month, it banned 47 Chinese apps. In September, it banned 118 Chinese apps. In November, it banned another 43 Chinese apps. So that was Series 1. That was in the middle of Galwan. Also in the middle of Galwan was Series 2, when in June 2020, Chinese companies were banned from road projects. And now we have this, the exclusion of Huawei and ZTE from India's telecom. So there is a direction that the government is moving. People may or may not want to put these things together or see it as a trend, but that's what it is. So your question to going forward is, there is going to be a Series 4, Series 5, 6, 7, 8. It will all be around keeping China out of India's critical infrastructure. And these, I would like to divide them into 4 parts. First, around physical infrastructure. That is, no China in India's ports, airports, energy, railways, defense. Second, virtual infrastructure, information technology, internet, broadband, robotics, artificial intelligence, drones. Again, they're leaders in drones, they're leaders in AI, they have cutting edge patents there, but we don't need them. Third, around systemic infrastructure, banking, finance. Imagine a Chinese run bank in India and they do another Galwan. What's going to happen? And finally, the fourth area, which you can call others or miscellaneous, like space, nuclear. And I think after this made in China virus, the Wuhan virus, I would like to include public health into as part of India's critical infrastructure, where China should not be allowed at any cost. And it's not just me. I think I echo a lot of people, and I think this is the way forward. This is going to happen. One sector after another, China will be out of it.
Yeah, actually, I just want to take it forward from here. As you mentioned, the Wuhan virus. In fact, in a way, kind of cornering China at this time of, at this stage, I should use the words, would be far easier because of what has happened, because of COVID and China's lackadaisical attitude, not sharing information with the rest of the world, not letting any transparency in. Now, everybody seemed to be shamed at a point of time that, the virus could be a lab leak. Now, at a point of time, everybody who suggested the virus was a lab leak was either banned from Twitter or banned from YouTube. And now you have the New York Times carrying editorials after editorials saying, oh, no, it is it is a lab leak and it is a very viable hypothesis. So do you think
can I just interrupt you before you come to your question?
Yeah.
Everything that you have said, everything is part of that authoritarian structure where nobody has the courage, nobody has the right, entitlement to ask questions. There is no free press. There is no independent judiciary. There is no opposition party. There are no free citizens. And so an authoritarian despot can do everything that you have said and more and worse and get away with it. Can you imagine such a thing happening in United States?
No.
In Germany, in UK, in India?
Yeah.
Such things cannot happen. You can't even breathe without getting attacked. If you look at the recent chaos around COVID management of India, whatever the government does, whichever government, state government, union government, there are more attacks than responses. And at the end, sometimes some response happens and you get some solution, right, wrong, maybe not efficient. But that's how democracies function, and we have to learn to live with it. Perhaps we can get a better model tomorrow. China is not that model. Yeah,
no,
sorry.
I actually, no. This is a very important point that you've made. In fact, the biggest difference between India and China in this entire process is China messed the whole world up. Indian politicians, whether state or center, I mean, I've been very critical of the center and the states both in this entire COVID fiasco. And the point is, yes, we are allowed to criticize them in India. We criticize them daily, whether it's the Prime Minister Narendra Modi or in my case, the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Uddhav Thackeray. We are allowed to criticize them. That's a very important point. In fact, so my question was that in such a scenario where whether China wants to admit to it or not, China is cornered in the mind of the average citizen around the world. People are pissed off at them. Look, nobody likes a lockdown. Nobody likes to lose a livelihood. Nobody wants that. And every time it happens in somebody's country, the mind goes to, यार China ने फंसा दिया, ये लोगों ने वायरस भेज दिया और हम सबकी जिंदगी खराब हो गई और वो लोग तो उधर पार्टी कर रहे हैं बैठ के. So the point is, do you think in a way it will be much easier for all these countries to convince their citizenry to take actions against China without any backlash, even though China has many, I don't want to use names, elites and intellectuals on their paychecks?
I think elites and whatever paycheck business can be, the texture of currency, it's very fungible. So from China, it can move to America anyway. If you're willing to sell your pen, then the highest bidder, you don't need an ideological magnet or an ideological wish. If your pen is for sale, it's for sale. End of matter. I think the bigger danger, and not from India so much because we are not so well integrated, but definitely from Europe and definitely from America, is the corporates, the large companies of these two countries. The automotive makers of Germany, for instance, but their biggest market is China. The robotics manufacturers of Germany, the biggest market is China. The banking, the finance people from America, the biggest market is China. The biggest IPOs are in China. Several other retail stores, they're all in China. The growth market is China. So my sense is that the pressure on governments will not come from democracy, but it will come from capitalism. And here is where we will see another clash going forward. This conflict between democracy and capitalism has played out in several ways across time. I can give you several instances of it. But with China, again, you're going to see, for instance, let's just take Huawei. Will the telecom companies of Europe compromise on their profits and bonuses and allow the data of their subscribers and the citizens be held ransom with China? Is a question that they need to ask, and which they are not asking. They have got stuck up in fake issues, false liberal issues such as, we cannot stop country, you cannot stop, they can give us guarantees, this, that. What guarantee will China give? Who will make good that guarantee? And once you are invested in that technology, it's very difficult to get out because the 4 or 5 technologies do not talk to each other. And so I think the danger to citizens will not come because somebody wants to buy a cheap firecracker. It will be because somebody wants to sell an expensive car.
Yeah, I actually can't agree more with you, because I remember, so it's very interesting. Douglas Murray, he's a known political and social commentator in UK, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it was pretty much just like, the enemy is on the border and we are busy fighting over which gender pronoun should we use. That pretty much summed up the entire debate in the West.
In fact, Kushal, across history, the biggest battles are fought within. They are not fought with the enemy. You look at corporations. Egos are driving it, not the market. You want to fight with your rival, but you have to finish the infighting behind you first. And I think that's what's happening with democracies. That's the downside of freedom, or that's the texture of freedom. I don't know. But with China, there is unity of thought. One guy decides, we are going to do this. The media, the civil society, I don't know what civil society, the judiciary, the executive, the army, the whole world just moves in that direction. Look at Global Times, a pathetic rag. It's a propaganda instrument. What free press are we talking about? Can Global Times question Xi Jinping if it wants to attack Bhutan, a peace-loving country? Bhutan, set up villages out there, build islands in the middle of the sea, attack the South China Sea countries. In fact, the Filipino foreign minister was forced to abuse China. He used a 4-letter word. Of course, your podcast is also heard by gentler people, so I will refrain from using it. But
podcasts are allowed to swear.
And that is what China is bringing out. So it's at war with itself. It wants to show that I've got muscle, and therefore it's fighting with everybody else outside. And it has no checks and balances from within. With countries like India, anything you do, first you have to fight the opposition, the media, your own party differences. You have to come to a consensus and then move on, except in national security issues. So that's where perhaps government has a little more leeway in doing what it does. But even then, it has to report to the Parliamentary Standing Committee. But the checks are slightly less, and that's the only place perhaps where China can be checked. And
Just to add to your capitalism example, another great example of that is the National Basketball Association. Any sports loving fan would know that the NBA can do leaning things for Black Lives Matter and all the things that are happening inside America, but their biggest star, LeBron James, I mean, the biggest star in the history of basketball after Jordan, was asked about China and Uyghur Muslim and concentration camps in China. And he was like, wait, what? And the owner of Houston Rockets did something, and China overnight removed all Houston Rocket merchandise from all stores in China, because you know what? The biggest market for NBA outside America is China, and NBA shut up.
That's right. In fact, the biggest risk today, even in corporate boardrooms, is China. So let's imagine that one of our telecom companies was negotiating or had negotiated with Huawei and started their equipment, and then Galwan happened halfway.
That's a terrible situation.
What is the risk out there? Government of India says no Huawei. It's dangerous. What happens to that investment? More than the investment, what happens to the bonus of the CEO? What happens to the share price? What happens to the market capitalization? What happens to the millions of investors' wealth? So China is now a risk in the boardrooms, in corporate boardrooms. Germany and American boardrooms seem to be at the moment more powerful. But at some point, and we all know this, and that's the beauty of democracy, they will be voted out. People will vote for security of data, for safety of their information. They will not want to engage with the rogue nation.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put, Gautam. So, Gautam, before we wrap up today's discussion, I have to ask you this question. So, what are the next projects lined up? So, any books down the line or any new papers that you're working on?
Yeah, there are a couple of papers, and I'm already working on 2 books. This COVID thing has sort of slowed me down a bit. One book is on economic reforms, and the other is on Sri Aurobindo. So one book is already out, India 2030. I don't know if you've read that book. It tells you what the next 10 years look like across. It's an edited book with different people. This economic reforms it will celebrate the 30 years of India's economic reforms, which happened on 24th July. And the Sri Aurobindo book is a book in the run-up to the 150th birth anniversary of somebody who I think is 20th century's greatest thinker.
So awesome. So Gautam, I look forward to reading your book on Sri Aurobindo. By the way, for folks, if you do not know, Gautam is also a huge admirer of the Mahabharata. So if I've watched a few videos of Gautam discussing the Mahabharata too. So Gautam has 2 sides. He has the spiritual side and he has the economist side. So both sides are equally interesting. So in case if you have not checked them out, just for your information, in the description of the podcast, I'm going to leave the links to Gautam's writings, Gautam's books. So I insist all of you, please go and buy his books and read all his papers. So once again, Gautam, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Namaste.
All right, guys, time to wrap today's discussion up. If you like what we do over here at the Cārvāka podcast, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with multiple people. Also, leave a comment down there. The audio version of the podcast will be out too. So if you're listening to the audio version, please check out all the details of Gautam's books and articles in the description there too. I try my best to bring as many interesting discussions as I can to all of you. So please support the podcast. You can support the podcast in multiple ways. You can go on Patreon, or you can go and subscribe on the YouTube channel itself. You can send direct donations via UPI, or you can buy the Cārvāka podcast merch. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Goodbye.